here's your host, Alex Garrett.
And indeed, here we are. And I just want to say a prayer for the families of the 17 or more fatalities that Hurricane Ida has brought to our coastline. I mean, Hurricane Sandy was horrible. Tropical Storm Ida is pretty damn bad. It's affected the train service all across the city, as there are still limited services. There's part suspensions. There's still full suspensions. And it's a total disaster, any way you look at it. And I know President Biden is going to promise some relief efforts. We've seen other relief efforts for Louisiana. In fact, New York City was going to send down the FDNY, the NYPD, to help out with those rescue efforts down in Louisiana. But along this coast, it is pretty dismal. We've seen subways, and there's one thing about the subways, right? We post all these videos about how wild it is and sometimes how funny the subways can be. But judging by how many people lost homes, how many people's homes were damaged, how much damage was done by Ida in the Tri-State area, laughing at the subway being flooded out is no laughing matter. It should not be laughed at. We should be very concerned as to why all this rain is starting to pick up even more. Remember, they had to cancel that concert at Central Park, which had 3 inches or more of rain in like the first hour, I think, or something like that, of this storm. But Central Park had to cancel that big concert during a Barry Manilow set because of Hurricane Henry and the tropical storm there. And so, are we really prepared? Is emergency preparedness ready? We are under a state of emergency flood watch for the first time ever, according to CNN. And so I highly recommend we start reaching out to our neighbors, our family, our friends to see if they're okay in this aftermath. And once again, more rescue efforts having to be done in this beautiful city. And as we keep posted on the suspensions and keep an eye on all that, I have another question about the rescue efforts in Afghanistan, because those efforts are important as well. Can we stop being political and debating the politics of this horrible, horrible Afghanistan failed removal? A success would mean everybody is out safely. A success would mean that we did not lose 13 service members. And if I sound a little tired, it's because I am. I'm kind of tired of us sticking with the politics of this. I say let's tune out the politicians, yes, even the President of the United States, on this, and tune in to the private sector. Let me say that one more time. Let's tune out from politics and tune in to the private sector, to those who actually are giving a damn and working to help actually get our allies and American citizens out of Afghanistan right now, as the Taliban continues to take control, and they seem to be getting normalization, which doesn't make any sense to me. You know what else it doesn't make sense to? Let me talk to you about this group called Patriot Mountain. It's a group of retired veterans in Joplin, Missouri. Think of this, people. A town devastated by tornadoes and had to rebuild still gives a darn about people in the people and Americans. They're not just focused on their own effort reliefs. Remember, many had to donate to relief efforts in Joplin, Missouri. Now they're giving back. They're saying, let's pay it forward. And how are they doing so? Through a group called Aerial Recovery Group, which is rescuing Americans and allies from Afghanistan. And by the way, the group of retired veterans is called Patriot Mountain. And Boone Cutler of Patriot Mountain says this: we've got things set up, and we're going to be pulling out people out of Afghanistan that are our own people and our allies. If we run across people that are in dire need and imminent danger, we are going to help those too. We are humanitarians. It's what we care about. So a group of veterans and a rescue center And then even Henkel's Ace Hardware in Webb City and Joplin, Missouri are accepting donations to help. Have you heard of this effort yet? At all? Because you should be hearing about this. We should be veering away from what the media wants us to focus on, which is the political backlash and the political reaction to this. And I say let's start focusing on the private sector. If we want to get these people home, ladies and gentlemen, we have to do it ourselves. That is the most evident thing that I've learned in this whole effort, is we have to do it ourselves. An aerial recovery group out of Joplin, Missouri, creating Operation Flying to Freedom, is accepting donations. Aerial Global Community I believe org, could be com, let's see. .org, Aerial, AERIAL, globalcommunity.org. You got to check them out. You can find them on Facebook and Instagram. You can even text them at 615-961-6963 for more information. And just follow up, see what this is about. 100% of their donations will fund the operators and the rescue efforts of those trapped in Afghanistan. Again, I'm tired of hearing these ideas that this was a success. I'm tired of hearing that we may not be able to get everybody out. No, there's a will, there's a way. Aero Global Community is doing so. Patriot Mountain is doing so. And we should be doing so. Because we're Americans, first and foremost, and we should give a darn that Americans are stranded in Afghanistan, abandoned in Afghanistan. We should give a darn about that. Because they're our own citizens. Our allies, yes, as well. But you know, they were sending back Afghani refugees more so than Americans, which was mind-boggling. According to the Wall Street Journal, President Biden's former translator was left to fend for themselves in Afghanistan as the Taliban took over. They didn't take him back or her back. And then, of course, there were stories of journalists that were funded by the United States left over there. Did you hear about that? And you know it's not good when even the Washington Post is reporting on this. The United States left behind more than 100 government-sponsored journalists and their families after putting them through 3 weeks of hell. This, according to the Washington Post, Josh Rogan. And the administration was warned early and often about the 600 or so employees, contractors, and family members who worked for U.S.-sponsored news organizations under the umbrella the U.S. Agency for Global Media, a federal agency funded by Congress. Journalists that work for the Voice of America, Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, who have worked in Afghanistan for years. They've actually had killings as well, as the Taliban killed 4 RFE/RL journalists since 2016 through suicide bomb attacks. So we have left U.S. journalists, U.S.-sponsored journalists, in harm's way. 600 or so employees or more. And by the way, there's so many facets to this. The VA, Veterans Affairs, admitting that they're getting suicidal hotline calls more than ever. According to the Washington Examiner, they've got them at a pace of 35,000 calls during this Afghanistan evacuation, including former Afghanistan soldiers that served in Afghanistan. So overall, this was by far not a success, and it's now up to the private sector, not the politicians, to solve this issue. You could say what you want about the rogue representatives that tried to bring people back in that rescue mission. But obviously, bureaucracy is going to get in the way of those efforts. So we have to look for the private sector, to places like aerial recovery, which is based in Joplin, Missouri. And they have this thing called Operation Flying to Freedom. And I'd say check that out. I first heard about this, by the way, from not the mainstream media, from a place called 4stateshomepage.com. And it was an article by Jessica Ducic. But I come on here tonight on Alex Garrett Podcasting to ask this. Do we continue listening to what everybody has to say? Or do we start doing something that's not being done? Meaning, do we start highlighting efforts that are being done to make sure our citizens are safe and out of Afghanistan, out of the Taliban's harm's way? That's what we really want to focus on here. And I think the fitting thing would be nearly 20 years later to say, we will not be scared off by the Taliban. We will go in there. We will stand side by side with our American citizens that are stuck there and bring them home and be undaunted by the tactics of the Taliban, which I last checked were on the terrorist watch list, right? I mean, there are some not so good guys. There's some evil in that group that I guess we're going to have to see how they do running the country, but I don't foresee it being a very good outcome. Do you? If you do, shoot me an email. I'd love to read your response to this. Alex@alexgnyc.com. Alex@alexgnyc.com. I'll be continuing on Can You Dig It Sports on the Sports Hour side of things as well, but I had to talk about this because as I kept hearing and listening to cuts of the White House, of Jen Psaki, of President Biden, and I thought to myself, it's the same old, what else can we do? What can be done? Who's doing things? And one Google search, boom, I found a group, Patriot Mountain, a group of veterans that are saying, we will support rescue efforts to get our Americans and allies out of Afghanistan now. Because now's the only time we can do it. Not before full control by the Taliban. And I don't know what that looks like. I don't even know how we've got here, but we've got here and we've got to deal with it. And maybe, just maybe, we'll be surprised and this whole plan of letting them take over will actually lead to them being killed off. Them being the Taliban through airstrikes. Maybe there is some surprises up this military that's been sleeved, but so far this military has been quite inept at this exit. And I can't expect them to do a complete 180 and surprise us all. Then again, we've shown our military might before, and if this tactic of letting them take control only to beat them down is the thing, that would be very, very interesting. And maybe nobody's thought of it this way, but could be a very interesting way to knock them out if they let them take control for a minute and then boom, annihilate them, which we could do. We have the military power. We still have our equipment there. And if we just take over that equipment, maybe that's the plan. But for now, I want you to check out, once again, the website is aerialglobalcommunity.org, aerialglobalcommunity.org. They have not paid for any advertisement here. This is me just randomly Googling how we can get people out of this situation, and they were the first group that popped up. So check them out, and I hope to have a representative from this group in the coming days on Alex Garrett Podcasting, where you can find me at Alex G Podcast, Twitter, Instagram, and AlexGNYC1 is my actual personal Instagram if you want to follow me there too. But let's get our fellow Americans out of Afghanistan and stop listening to politics and start listening to the private sector. They've got the ideas here, and we should follow them. Have a great night, and we will talk to you soon. And if you're in the New York area, well, firstly, to those affected by Hurricane Ida, I mean, this is just Tropical Storm Ida. More relief efforts going on there. Obviously, in parts of Louisiana, it's just destroyed again, and we pray for them. The New Orleans Saints now having to play in Jacksonville for the first week. It's that bad. And up here in New York, we are getting soaked, but I can't imagine the devastation that's been going on down there will happen here. But stay safe nonetheless if you're in the tri-state area, and we will get through this. I'm Alexander Garrett. Have a great evening, and we'll talk to you soon.